Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne. You are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. Last week, I brought you the story of Missy Avila, and during that episode, I talked to you about the made-for-TV movie that was made about the case. And as I was researching last week's episode, I came across another made-for-TV Lifetime movie about a similar case. And this one you might know. It's often referred to as The Death of a Cheerleader, A Friend to Die For. They made two specific made-for-TV movies about this case, and I find it very interesting because I don't know what to believe, and I wanted to see if you maybe wanted to share your opinions and tell me what you think. This is the case of Kirsten Costas.
You were nothing before you met me. You were playing Barbies with Betty Finn. You were a bluebird. You were a brownie. You were a Girl Scout cookie. I got you into a Remington party. What's my thanks? It's on a hallway carpet. I got paid in puke. Lick it up, baby. Lick it up. Monday morning, your history. I'll tell everyone about tonight. Transfer to Washington. Transfer to Jefferson. No one at Westerberg's gonna let you play their reindeer games.
I just thought it was so fitting to share that scene from my favorite movie, Heathers, because that's what this whole case reminds me of. The whole time I'm reading about this case, I'm watching the two made-for-TV movies, all I can think about is the scene where Heather tells Veronica that basically her social standing at high school is about to be over once the weekend ends. Our case today takes place in 1984 in California, a suburban town of California called Orinda. Orinda was a very wealthy community, upper middle class. The schools were spectacular. I mean, everybody wanted to be, keeping up with the Joneses in this neighborhood. Orinda was a quiet, peaceful, suburban area. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone had the most beautifully manicured lawns with great landscaping and just beautiful cars in their driveways. Kirsten Costas was born July 23rd, 1968. Her parents were named Arthur and Barrett Costas. Her mother's name is so cool, Barrett. I love that name. She also had a brother named Peter, and they were living the life up in Orinda, California. Kirsten was very popular in high school. She was the queen bee cheerleader. She was on the swim team. She was a member of the Bobolinks. So the Bobolinks, or the Bobbies as they were known in high school, they were this sorority type group at the high school. So the girls strived to be in that group. A lot of kids at the school said though that group was kind of just the stuck-up girls, and nobody really wanted to be a part of that group unless you were, a part of the coolest girls in school. Along with everything else that Kirsten did, she was also a part of the yearbook committee, and she was considered what you would say teenage dream. She was a teenage dream, the center of everything in that high school. Now, there was another girl at Miramonte High School who was the complete opposite of Kirsten. Her name was Nancy Kane, and I think that I would have been more like Nancy Kane at this high school. She was considered goth at that time. She used to be a part of Kirsten's clique, and she used to be a part of this cool girl club, but she kind of changed as the years were going on, and she just didn't dig it. She didn't dig that scene, and she kind of separated herself from the girls, which I think kind of embarrassed Kirsten because she didn't really like to be nice to Nancy. And she would, make fun of her in front of all the other kids, kind of call her out for the way she dressed. And Nancy was just like, whatever, leave me alone. She didn't care. Now we have another girl in the group, and this girl is named Bernadette Prati. And Bernadette was someone that really wanted to be Kirsten's best friend. She wanted to be just like Kirsten, and she secretly wished that she had everything that she had. And she didn't, because although Bernadette grew up in the same neighborhood, she was the youngest of 6 children. So her parents were retired at the time that she was in high school. So her parents were actually, penny pinchers at that point. Even though they had a beautiful house and they had enough money to live comfortably, they didn't have the kind of money that Kirsten's family had, and they didn't have the kind of money that could buy Bernadette all the newest clothes, the coolest car, and the greatest hairstyles. Bernadette's father was a retired public utility supervisor for the city of San Francisco. So he saved and he gave his children a great life, but Bernadette was embarrassed by this sort of modest lifestyle. And you know how tough that is when you're in high school and you want to be like everyone else. You want to be able to at least look like you're like everyone else. And most of us are just kind of like, fuck that. But some people really, really, really want these like social standings. And Bernadette really tried. I mean, she was also a member of the Bobolinks. And she really wanted to be a cheerleader, and she wanted to be a part of the yearbook committee. She tried so hard. She worked her ass off to practice to become a cheerleader. She was actually convinced she was definitely going to be on the yearbook committee because she was a fabulous writer. And that's what sucks, is that Bernadette should have been like focused on her own specific talents and not, trying to emulate another person in the high school. And by all accounts, it doesn't seem like Kirsten was very nice to Bernadette, but that's where I get a little lost, because that's what Bernadette says. And that's what everyone says about Kirsten being mean to Nancy. So we do have people coming forward and having actual facts that yes, Kirsten was mean to Nancy in front of other people, including classmates and teachers. But I don't really see anything where anyone says they ever saw her be mean to Bernadette, except for this one incident that they talk about in actually both made-for-TV movies. They make a really big point to mention this every time. There was a ski trip, and you had to pay, I think it was something ridiculous, like anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 to go on this ski trip. And of course, Bernadette's parents could not afford this. So Bernadette worked her ass off. She babysat. She painted houses they portray in the made-for-TV movie. Well, she was painting people's houses, I think. And she saved up enough money to go on the ski trip to be with all the other girls, the other Bobolinks. So she's stoked. She saves up all this money. But oh my God, there's one problem. She does not have any money to buy clothes to go skiing, nor does she know how to ski. Which skiing is such an expensive sport to do. And if you're hanging out with a bunch of, children of yuppies who have really fancy houses in a really upscale neighborhood, they know how to ski. So she has to wear hand-me-downs from her older brothers and sisters. And it was stated by a couple of the girls and by Bernadette that Kirsten did make fun of the clothes that Bernadette had on when they were on the ski trip, and that it embarrassed Bernadette so much that she held on to that feeling of embarrassment. She still wanted to be Kirsten's best friend, though. She was not giving up on the fact that she wanted everything she had. She wanted to just be like a carbon copy of her. So it did not help matters much when both girls try out for the cheerleading squad and Bernadette doesn't get picked. They picked 4 girls to be on the cheerleading squad. And to give you an example of how like hoity-toity this school was, and this is high school, so they really push that everyone has to be their best in this high school, and you better try your hardest. They love the football players and they love the cheerleaders. And when the cheerleaders were picked, they had a big assembly for it, and every cheerleader gets to walk up on stage and they get greeted with flowers, which is crazy. And Bernadette had to watch the other bobolinks get picked, walk up on stage, and she did not get picked. And you know, that sucks. You gotta feel kind of like shit when that happens, but get over it. But then comes the part where she thinks, it's fine. I'm gonna get picked for the yearbook staff. And she doesn't. So not only is she now, the poorest one of all of her friends, she did not make cheerleading, she did not make yearbook, and Kirsten's making fun of her in front of everybody that she wants to be friends with. Bernadette was quoted as saying, we don't have a lot of money and stuff, and I just had this really crummy pair of skis and some boots, but I was having fun anyway, and she made some comments about them. It just seemed like everybody else was thinking that, but she was the only one who would ever come out and say that. And, the comment was snobby. The comment was meant to, make everyone laugh at Bernadette's expense. And that hurts when you are a teenage girl and you have this desire to fit in a spot you don't fit into. Honestly, she should have been like best friends with Nancy, because Nancy seems so cool to me, because Nancy didn't care about any of this. Nancy just did what she wanted, lived her life, went about her day. That's where it's at. Interrupting this episode of Residue to introduce you to a new true crime show that I know you're going to enjoy.
There are over 300,000 cases that are unsolved or have gone cold in the United States alone. That number increases by over 6,000 every year, ranging from homicides to missing persons to undetermined deaths. Families are lacking answers about what happened to their loved ones, victims lacking justice. My name is Jen Rivera, and I'm an investigative journalist and true crime podcaster on a mission to give victims a voice, while diving into the unseen realm of true crime cases. From cases that dominated the headlines to those that you're not hearing about in the media. Join me as I dive deep into the haunting narratives of these cases. Each season, I'll be investigating a new case and advocating for victims through well-researched, ethically conducted storytelling, always keeping the victim's voice at the heart. The Unseen Truth is my passion project, the true unification of my education, career, superpowers, and interests, all in one podcast, covering cases from my home state in the Midwest and beyond. With a mix of documentary-style production and narrative episodes, I interview surviving family and friends and get insight from detectives and valuable sources that know these cases best. I'm unveiling the secrets in the shadows. I'm Jen Rivera, and this is The Unseen Truth. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
It is June 21st, 1984, and Kirsten Costas' mother is about to receive a phone call. She gets a phone call from one of the bobolinks, and, I'm not going to try to hide it from you. This is Bernadette. Bernadette is now come up with this brilliant plan that if she can just get Kirsten alone, maybe she can change her mind about her. Like, maybe she can get Kirsten to see how cool she is, that it doesn't matter what kind of clothes or what kind of car she has. She is just such a cool person. So what she does is she calls Kirsten's mother, Barrett, and she says, "Hey, Mrs. Costas, I am one of the bobolinks, and the bobolinks are going to hold a dinner for all of its new members, but we don't want you to tell Kirsten about it. I want to keep it secret. It's a secret meeting. So Barrett says, "What should my daughter wear?" And Bernadette tells her to have her dress up and that she will have someone pick Kirsten up on a certain night, but to just keep it secret. And she isn't supposed to know who's going to show up to pick her up. Of course, Kirsten's mom is so excited because she's like, "Oh, this is so cool. My daughter gets to go to this secret sorority meeting, and awesome. I'll let her know. I'll tell her you're going to pick her up. This is cool." Now, just for the record, Bernadette knew that Kirsten wasn't going to be home that night that she called her home because she was at a cheerleading camp with the other girls who made the squad. So she purposely chose this night to call, and I think that's kind of suspicious. So the big night finally arrives, and Kirsten is dressed and ready to go. A car pulls up to her front door. She runs out, excited to get into the car, opens the car, and sees that it's Bernadette. And from what Bernadette says, Kirsten said, "Oh my God, not you." That's got to be frustrating. But, maybe don't make up a secret rendezvous here. Anyway, so the girls start driving. And, Kirsten is still under the impression that she is going to a secret sorority meeting right now. And Bernadette informs her that she lied to Kirsten's mother and that they're actually going to go to a party. So here's how this story goes. Okay. This party was supposed to be taking place a couple towns away. They start to drive and Kirsten says, "Fine. If we're going to go to a party, I'm going to need you to pull over into that church parking lot first so that I can smoke some weed." Bernadette says that she pulled into the parking lot. Kirsten started to roll a joint, and she asked Bernadette if she wanted to smoke some. And Bernadette was like, "Oh God, no, I cannot do that. This is my father's car. It's going to smell." And Kirsten was kind of like, "You're such a nerd." Now, this story is widely debated by Kirsten's family and Kirsten's friends, who said she never smoked marijuana. And I have my own doubts about this story because it almost seems as if, Bernadette wanted to say something to kind of put Kirsten down, to make her not look so perfect in everyone's eyes. But the thing is that, and I've heard a lot of other people say this, that Kirsten was everything that Bernadette wanted to be. So if she finally has her alone and this cool girl in school wants to smoke a joint with her, why wouldn't she do it? That part seems off to me. Another thing seemed off to Kirsten, according to Bernadette. So Kirsten turns the car light on and she notices that Bernadette is wearing a tracksuit or track pants, and she's not dressed up for a party. So Kirsten is kind of like, "What are you wearing? We're definitely not going to a party, are we?" So here's where the story gets a little bit strange. To backtrack a tiny bit, Bernadette doesn't even have her permit. She's not supposed to be driving. This isn't her car. This is her father's Pinto. She lied to her parents. She told her parents that she was babysitting a couple houses down or a couple blocks away from their house that night. Her dad drove her to the babysitting gig, and when they got there, she begged her father to leave the car. "Daddy, can you leave the car? Because I'm afraid of people knowing that I'm here alone, and if there's a car in the driveway, everything would be cool." And her dad does it. He puts up a little fight, "You don't even have your driver's license. I don't want you driving." But she's like, "Oh my God, Daddy, it's only a couple blocks away." And he leaves her the car and he walks home. So she's not babysitting. She's now going to go pick up her friend who has no idea what is going on. Another thing is that while Kirsten's sitting in the car, she notices that there's a huge 8-inch butcher knife sitting on the passenger side floor. Bernadette explains away this knife as this, and they really push this fact in the made-for-TV movie, Death of a Cheerleader. Bernadette says that her sister loves eating veggies, particularly, apparently, she loves eating veggies, and I think it was tomatoes. In the movie, they use cucumbers, and they keep having her sister drive around town in the movie, holding a cucumber and cutting it with a big butcher knife. the whole movie. It's crazy. And the whole time I'm like, this is weird, but it's because they're foreshadowing. So yeah, butcher knife. Kirsten is weirded out by all of this, as she should be. I mean, this is weird. So the girls start to argue. They're quarreling in the car, and Kirsten leaves the car. She's like, no, you know what? Screw this, dude. I am not sticking around for this, which bravo, Kirsten. That is amazing. She walks to a house. Now, this is a home of some people. She has no idea who these people are. This was the home of Alex and Mary Jane Arnold. Now, Alex and Mary Jane are hanging out at home that night. They're playing cards with some friends, and they hear a knock on their door. They go to the door, and it's Kirsten. You know, this adorable 15-year-old girl is asking them for help. She's very kind, and she says, excuse me, ma'am and sir, my friend is acting very strange. I'm very uncomfortable, and I would love to use your phone. Remember, this is the 80s. We did not have any cell phones. So they let her in, which is amazing to me because I would never. I would be like, yo, I'll call the cops for you, dude. But they let her in, thankfully. She goes in, she calls her parents, but her parents knew that she was going to be out at a sorority dinner all night. So they actually were attending one of her brother's events. So she can't reach her parents. And this amazing couple, I mean, bravo to Alex and Mary Jane. Alex says, you know what? I'll drive you home. Why don't we get you in the car and I'll take you home? Why don't you tell me what's going on with your friend out there? Now, this whole time, Bernadette is losing her damn mind. She is following Kirsten in her car. She is parked outside of the Arnold's home, and she is just like watching Kirsten. So they get into the car. Alex Arnold actually explains that she was pretty calm in the car, that Kirsten wasn't really upset. She was staying calm. She was talking about cheerleading. She was talking about school. She was being, you know, pretty social and awesome. And Alex noticed, like, there is this Pinto still following me. So he's like, honey, are you sure you're okay? Because that car that you were in is still behind us and following us. And so since her parents aren't home, Kirsten, who has all the right skills, says, why don't you drop me off at my neighbor's house? Because I know my neighbors are home. Now, these neighbors knew her since she was a little girl. So she goes up to the neighbor's house, and Alex doesn't leave. He's awesome. He stays and he notices that the Pinto is still watching Kirsten. He sees Kirsten start to walk up to the front door of the neighbor's house. And what happens is he just hears some screaming. He hears, no, get away from me. Leave me alone. What are you doing? And then he sees someone run and get back into the car. At this point, Kirsten makes it to the front door of her neighbor's house, rings the doorbell. They come outside. They can't believe what they see. They see their 15-year-old neighbor lying on the ground, begging for help, saying she stabbed me. And Kirsten is just laying there, bleeding through her clothes. The neighbors call an ambulance, and the ambulance arrives pretty quickly, gets Kirsten into the ambulance. At the same time, her father is driving the family home. He pulls up and he's like, what is happening? Something's happening at our neighbor's house. So obviously he thinks it's the neighbors. You know, he doesn't think this is something that's happening to his family. He glances into the ambulance and he could see his daughter's hair in the ambulance. Goodness. So they get Kirsten to the hospital, and 1 hour later, Kirsten Costas dies from the knife wound injuries. The entire community is just shocked. Stuff like this does not happen here. This is insanity. No one knows who did it. No one knows why this happened. And when Kirsten's funeral was held, the entire community showed up. I'm talking hundreds of people showed up to show their respect. It was teachers, students, and Bernadette. So Bernadette did attend the funeral, and to everyone there, it seemed like she was deep in mourning. Of course, the entire High School is just abuzz with who could have done this. And who do you think they think did it? Of course, they think Nancy did it because Nancy's so goth, and Kirsten was publicly mean to Nancy in front of students and teachers. So Nancy's about to have her life ruined at this point. This entire school has turned against Nancy to the point that Nancy is driven out of that school. Her parents have to pick up everything and move to an entirely different community because their child is now being blamed for something that she did not do. And this entire time while this is happening, do you think that Bernadette came forward once? No, of course she didn't. In fact, Bernadette passes a lie detector test that is given to her. It's insane. She is a 15-year-old high school student, and she was able to pass a lie detector test. So she went way under the radar on this one, which seems insane to me because they were the only people in town that drove a Pinto. It was a yellow Pinto. And Alex Arnold told the police the person who did this was driving a yellow Pinto. I mean, they interviewed Bernadette. They thought she did it enough so that they gave her a lie detector test. And then they weren't like, oh, wait, she drives a Pinto. Is that weird? Should we check it out? No, they didn't. What is interesting about Bernadette is that she just went on easily with life. And she even said that I lived through every day because it didn't seem real. She was completely distancing herself from the actual crime. She was blocking out the tragedy of everything that she did. I mean, that's not a good thing, right? To be able to kill your friend and to act like it was nothing. Bernadette not only passed a lie detector test and drove a Pinto, but she also told the police that she was babysitting that night. And, surprisingly, the police never checked that alibi out. They never went over to the house of the people she was supposed to be babysitting for and asked, hey, so did she babysit for you? They never did that. They do finally do it, and they do find out, I'm talking 6 months later, that Bernadette was lying to them. The FBI is now involved, and not only that, Kirsten's family hired a private investigator to do his own search on the killer. So things are starting to heat up a little bit for Bernadette now, and she's starting to become a little bit unraveled. She's not acting the same way she usually does. She's starting to think that she might get caught. Agent Ronald Hilley sits down with Bernadette in October of 1984. When he talks to her, he tells her that the FBI makes up profiles of killers. And so they had an idea of the psychological profile of the person who most likely killed Kirsten Costas. He reads out to Bernadette that the killer was most likely a girl that was going to be around the same age as Kirsten, and most likely they were friends. Bernadette admits to the FBI agent after he explains to her what the psychological profile was of the killer. She says to him, "That sounds just like me." And at that moment right there, Bernadette could have confessed to the FBI agent. And she could have, but she didn't. What she does is she starts to ask the agent, what would happen to her? What would happen to me if the public found out that I did this? And she said to him that public humiliation, social downfall would actually be worse for her than going to prison. But she was allowed to go home because they did not have one piece of evidence that they could use to say, yes, Bernadette did it. Bernadette goes home and she's having a rough night that night. She's getting a little nervous here. She's thinking about it. She's a church-going girl. This girl goes to church all the time. So she's even starting to think she should confess to her priest. And she gets home. She asks her mother if they could please sit down and have a talk. And Bernadette's mother says she's too tired. Can I just go to bed and tomorrow morning we can talk. On the morning of December 11th, 1984, Bernadette wakes up for school. Her mother is downstairs in the kitchen, and Bernadette hands her mother a note. And she tells her, I wrote you this note, and I need you to read it, but I want you to wait 30 minutes before you read it. So Bernadette leaves, and she starts on her way to school. Her mother sets a timer for 30 minutes and reads her Bible and sets the note from her daughter aside. Here is a little bit of that note. Dear Mom and Dad, I have been trying to tell you this all day, but I love you so much it's too hard, so I'm taking the easy way out. The FBI man thinks I did it, and he is right. I've been able to live with it for a while, but I can't ignore it. It's too much for me, and I can't be that deceiving. Please still love me. I can't live unless you love me. I've ruined my life and yours, and I don't know what to do, and I'm ashamed and I'm scared. Please don't say how could you or why, because I don't understand this and I don't know why. A couple other things were recovered from the note that said, I have caused a lot of hurt and pain to a lot of people. I don't want to hurt people anymore. I want to go to heaven when I die. I regret what I did. I can't bring Kirsten back or change time. If I kill myself, I will hurt people even more. I think I could kill myself. I would go to hell if I killed myself. I would rather kill myself than go on living if people knew. Although it's incredible, my parents are saints who would forgive and love me. Bernadette's mother is just hysterical when she reads this letter. I mean, oh my goodness, do you have any idea what that woman must have been feeling? So she yells for her husband. They get in the car. They drive straight to the high school. They were quoted as saying they wanted one last moment with their daughter. They got her in the car and they took her directly to the police station and they made her confess everything. Now, Bernadette is going to confess to murdering Kirsten Costas on December 11th, 1984, but she will stand on that hill that she did not plan to kill her, that this was just a spur of the moment. The two girls were fighting. The knife that her sister uses to eat vegetables just so happened to be sitting there, and Bernadette just lost her mind in that moment. In her confession, Bernadette would say, we just talked, argued. Not argued really, but she didn't think smoking was any big deal, and I didn't want to, and she made me feel dumb. The defense is going to claim that this was an impulsive attack, that the knife was just left there, by coincidence. And even Bernadette's sister would get up on the stand and testify that, yes, she did leave that knife in the car. She did leave an 8-inch butcher knife in the car to eat her tomatoes at work, which I just can't get past that part. I don't buy it. I don't know. I want to know what you guys think because I do not buy it. I started to get really confused by this case because if you watch the made-for-TV movie Death of a Cheerleader, now this is the 1994 version, they really want you to know that Kirsten was a mean girl, and they really want you to think that Bernadette was kind of like meek and shy, and she did nothing wrong. She just lost her mind. It's a really bad portrayal because they do really victim blame a lot in that movie. Tori Spelling plays Kirsten. She does a great job being a bitchy cheerleader. And I'm going to tell you, Kellie Martin is amazing as Bernadette. I can't picture any other face in my head except Kellie Martin now when I think about Bernadette. Also, they made the movie again years later. They redid it so as to not victim blame Kirsten so much. And in this version, they actually do bring Kellie Martin back, and she plays the FBI agent, which I thought was pretty cool. So I wanted to add that into the story. The issue for me is that we don't really know what went down in the car that night. We don't know what was said between the two girls. we don't know why a knife was really in the car. And I feel like the fight they got into wasn't a big enough fight for Bernadette to chase Kirsten down and stab her. And I think it's proven because when Alex Arnold said when he drove Kirsten home, she seemed really calm. And you know what? She probably was calm. If she just got in this like stupid fight with a friend about, smoking weed, she might have just been like, whatever, Bernadette's weird, I'm going to go home. But she had no idea that Bernadette was like raging inside. So I don't think that I buy the fact that Bernadette didn't have this planned. I think she had it planned, because why do a secretive meetup, not tell your name to Kirsten's mother? I'm sorry, but I don't believe that the knife was in the car because someone was eating tomatoes on their lunch break. I mean, yeah, maybe bring a knife, but not an 8-inch butcher knife. Of course, Kirsten's family doesn't buy any of this. They're beyond heartbroken and horrified by this entire situation. They just want this trial to be done with. And at the trial, Bernadette Prati was finally sentenced. And this is how many years she was sentenced. She was sentenced to a maximum of 9 years. 9 years. She was actually released 7 years later in 1992 when she was paroled at the age of 23. Kirsten's parents lost their mind. The family couldn't handle it. They could not handle being in this community anymore, rightfully so. The Costas ended up leaving Orinda and they moved to Hawaii in 1986. In a statement to the judge, Barrett Costas said, "My heart is empty. I ache. I am half a person." Her husband said, "I don't believe the punishment will ever match the crime." Since her release, Bernadette Prati has legally changed her name. She has married, and it is said that she does have a child. I did read on Reddit and I did Google and found some information that she does also have a blog, a cooking channel, and if you did a quick search, you could see that she covers things about health food cooking, coupon offers, discount deals, and practical life hacks. Death of a Cheerleader was the most highly rated TV movie of 1994. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Residue. You all rule my life, and it would be so kind of you if you could share the podcast with your friends. Find me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, on Facebook at Residue, a true crime podcast. Send me some comments or DMs. Let me know what you guys think about this story. I want to know where you guys stand on whether or not Bernadette Prati had this whole thing planned from the beginning. Also, if you could leave a review, that would be super awesome, and it would help the show out so much. Until next week, I just gotta tell ya, stay safe and stay paranoid.